We are back here on WLTH 1370 AM. That's 92.7 in the FM dial. It is 7:42 in the PM here on June the 6th, 2025. Yes, it is. So yeah, we talk about this regularly, but the future is here and the future is now. But it is important to understand that there is no future without the past. And so without so many of the different events that happened along the way that allowed us to live our current future, whether you think it's great or dystopian, or some combination of both, it's important to understand how we got here. And for times like this, it's time for our segment called Black in the Day. Stay with us. Yes, so let's go black in the day. Back to 1955. This week, 70 years ago. This week. Brown versus Board of Education was expanded upon by the Supreme Court. Now, obviously, we all know about the 1954 decision, which ordered the desegregation of schools, but how much do we know about the 1955 expansion of Brown versus Board of Education? At the time, it was seen as actually a setback in the movement to desegregate, because it essentially said that schools could enforce educational desegregation at a deliberate speed, basically on their own time. And so basically these school districts in the South were trying to run out the clock, trying to put off desegregation as much as they could. So by 1955, in the Supreme Court, they were already considering arguments by schools requesting relief concerning the task of desegregation. In their decision, which became known as Brown number 2, let's just go with Brown 2. The court delegated the task of carrying out school desegregation to district courts with order that desegregation occur with all deliberate speed. So at this point, they're saying, look, this is happening too fast. This desegregation, like, we can't just have all these black people and white people going to school together all at once. We got to do it at deliberate speed. Okay. So it was another delay in the movement to desegregate schools. Ultimately, they could not hold off what was inevitable, which was the fact that it was, and now is currently universally known, that separate and equal is not really a thing, not within this country or any other. Look at what's going on in Israel with the Palestinians and the Israelis, or apartheid South Africa. Separate but equal is really not a thing. It's usually always separate and unequal within a particular state. And so Brown 2 just sort of put off a little bit the inevitable and sort of forced these civil rights activists who had been celebrating just a year earlier to take a step back. Now, a lot of the supporters of the 1954 decision were really disappointed by this. The language at all deliberate speed was so ambiguous that schools could use it as a way to justify not segregating in any real timely manner. A lot of the southern states and school districts used this decision as legal justification for resisting, delaying, or avoiding segregation for a long time. And so, again, it's important to look at things like this because a lot of people tend to think of time as linear and progress as linear, should I say. They think of progress as linear. Like, okay, you have this decision and everything is good from here on out. No, you have setbacks. You take a step forward, you take a step back. Sometimes you take 2 steps forward, sometimes you take a step back. Sometimes you take 2 steps back, and then sometimes you take a step forward and a step back. Progress is not always such a linear thing. And so Brown 2 teaches us that. Now, for example, based on Brown 2, the U.S. District Court ruled that in Prince Edward County, Virginia, that they did not have to desegregate immediately. When they were faced with a court order to finally begin desegregation in 1959, the County Board of Supervisors stopped appropriating money for public schools, which closed. They would rather have closed their schools rather than follow the original Brown versus Board of Education 1954 decision of desegregation. And that's important to understand what racism is. There's this movement, even among a lot of my people on the left, that tends to look at racism as solely being about economic anxiety. Oh, really? It's just about, a lot of white people or a lot of people of this group or that group are just anxious about losing their jobs. No, it's not always just, don't get me wrong, economic anxiety plays a part in racism. It does. A lot of times people who would not necessarily typically have overtly racist views definitely allow them to happen when there's some economic anxiety. That is true. And in times of economic anxiety, racism does get worse. But it is not inherent. There are plenty of times throughout American history. I'm reading a book now called Organized Labor and the Black Worker from 1619 to 1981. It's a really good book. And the one thing that keeps getting my attention is over and over again throughout the 19th and 20th century, how many times white workers were willing to hurt themselves, destroy their own economic outlook just to keep from having to share a labor union with black workers. The great labor leader Samuel Gompers went to white laborers and said, look, if you guys don't let black people in your unions, the capitalists are going to hire them. They're going to use the black scab labor as a way to drive down your wages, or they're going to hire them instead of you. You won't have a job at all. So if you let black people in your union, they would much rather hire you as a white person than the black person who's in the same union as you. These workers said, no, we would rather not have jobs than allow black people in the AFL, American Federation of Labor. So again, this is another situation in Prince Edward County, Virginia, where they would rather have closed their own public schools for 5 years, depriving a lot of their own children of education, rather than follow the Supreme Court order from 1954 to desegregate their schools. So again, it just goes to show you that racism isn't just about economic anxiety. That's a part of it, but it's not fully it. But ultimately, Brown versus Board of Education ended up being a pivotal moment in American history, because at least it did have some legal groundwork in ending this false premise of separate but equal. It overturned Plessy versus Ferguson's doctrine in public education. And it actually weakened the foundation, the legal foundation of segregation in transportation and public facilities and other places. It was a catalyst for a lot of the civil rights legislation, like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and by establishing that segregation was unconstitutional. So, you know, ultimately, it's important to understand that just because you take a step back, just because there's a little bit of an impediment to what's going on in your society, what you're trying to do, that does not mean that ultimately it won't lead to a bigger, better gain, a bigger, better victory. So I think it's important to show these type of instances where people are so excited to get a court decision like Brown versus Board of Education, and then they get so disappointed when something just sort of goes back in the opposite direction. But ultimately, it led to other court decisions. It led to other forms of progress that, you know, ultimately I benefit here today. Okay, I tell people all the time, my life is much different than my great-grandparents who had to run from Mississippi, literally had to run from Mississippi in the dead of night to escape the Ku Klux Klan. My grandparents and parents who grew up during segregation. I am grateful for all that the civil rights movement did for my generation. I live here in a black city, an 80% black city. My mayor is black. My city council's black. Okay, many of the people I see doing business and doing other things in my community are black people. Those things are done because people fought. People fought in courts, people fought in streets, people fought everywhere. And so it's important to understand and remember these different events like Brown versus Board of Education. And this was the 70th anniversary of Brown 2. Let me get this call. I got to get out of here, but let me get this caller before I go. Hello, caller. What's up? Make it quick. I got to get out of here.
Hey, congratulations again. All these things have connectivity to them. They all have connectivity.
Yeah.
And you're right on the trail.
Well, I heard that.
You know what Hoover thought of Dr. King, right?
He thought he's the most dangerous Negro in America.
And Powell Jr. was his pal.
Yeah.
Becoming Supreme Court jurist.
Yeah.
Was a friend of that man.
Yeah. He was.
And they took over the Chamber of Commerce.
Absolutely.
And they used the Department of Education and the pulpit to promote their stuff.
Absolutely.
God bless them.
Thank you for your call, Vic. It's all good. Vic always gonna make sure that you stay fully educated and fully informed on what happened, and that's why we love having them call into the show. Oh man, I can't believe it's already 7:55 and I gotta get ready to get out of here. But I don't want Dr. Williams to come in here with the 2x4 and start regulating like Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So, all right.